Good morning. This is Arlan Suderman, Chief Commodities Economist at StoneX with a midday look at today's markets on February 28th. It's an ugly day again in the grain and oilseed markets. A lot of uncertainty about tariffs. It's been on and off again, kind of with President Trump calling tariff news on the fly. He likes to keep things uncertain. He likes people not knowing what's coming next, but that uncertainty is creating havoc in the markets right now. As we look at the tariff situation, first we had the 25% tariffs against Canada and Mexico and 10% on China that were implemented on February 1st. And it was all focused on whether they would be able to stop the flow of drugs and illegal migrants into the country through our borders. Canada and Mexico quickly made some major investments and changes to the point where President Trump says, okay, we're going to pause this for 30 days to make sure this happens. And the sense in the marketplace was that everything would happen. We'd never see those 25% tariffs. There might be other issues down the road, but the 25% tariffs, probably not, that were related to the border. The 10% tariffs did go in effect on China. And then as we got into this week, we heard that President Trump said, well, the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico will probably go into effect again next week when the 30-day pause is over. The White House came out then and clarified no new tariff announcements until April 2nd. President Trump's task force on tariffs is expected to give him a report on April 1st, and then we expected to see significant tariff news start to come out April 2nd. That was immediately followed by President Trump coming out and saying, no, the 25% tariffs will go into effect on March 4th, the end of the 30-day pause for Canada and Mexico, because they haven't done enough, he said, to stop the flow of fentanyl and its products into the United States. And I'm going to add another 10% on China effective Tuesday as well. So that has the markets in a little bit of turmoil. The other thing that's at play here, this is a money flow factor, and let's keep that in mind. We saw a lot of money flow starting to come into the corn market this fall. And it was a sense the grain and oilseed complex overall had underperformed relative to the rest of the markets, relative to the rest of the commodity world in 2024. And so when we look at the grain and oilseed sector, it lost, according to our StoneX commodity index tracker, the grain and oilseed sector had lost 20.5% value in 2023. 14.5% in 2024, and had been struggling. And suddenly, with inflation expectations coming back once again, and remember late last April and May, as we told you that we could expect inflation expectations to support the funds being uncomfortable with their big short positions, we saw a short covering rally that lifted those grains in late April and March. Excuse me, late April and early May. And then that quickly dissipated when the Fed came out with headlines that they had inflation under control and not to worry, inflation was not going up, and the funds shorted us again. And I anticipated that we would see reinflation pressures come back once the Fed started aggressively cutting interest rates, which they started on September 18th. They cut interest rates by 100 basis points in the final 4 months of the year, and that's when inflation expectations start going up. You follow the 2-year break-even inflation rate, the 5-year break-even inflation rate, various surveys that are out there all had inflation expectations going up. The funds tend to want to own commodities. Doesn't mean every commodity, doesn't mean every time, but over the last 10 years, we've seen that tendency. And so they were short commodities. So they came in first in corn, followed by soybeans, then eventually by wheat. But now with the tariff uncertainty, worries about what it might do to economic growth here in the United States and globally, we're seeing that profit taking. We eventually turned the charts lower, broke through support on corn and soybeans, then wheat, and the algo momentum trading algos really piled on at that point. So that's what's happened to this point. We have the tariffs coming up on Tuesday, unless we get some type of an agreement between now and then. Of course, the headlines could change, but going into the weekend, traders are playing it safe and they're following the current trend, which is liquidation into the end of the month. So that's a wrap on the month of February and what's happening at midday here on February 28th, 2025.